The coffee was already cold by the time I noticed the number on the screen. I remember standing in the kitchen, still in my work boots from the day before, because I'd gotten home late and just sat down in the recliner and fallen asleep before I could even take them off. My wife used to tease me about that, said I was the only man she knew who could sleep sitting straight up like I was waiting for a bus. She'd been gone 14 months by then. The teasing was something I missed more than I expected to. I wasn't planning to check the account that morning. I'd gone to the kitchen for coffee, maybe some toast, and I'd set my phone down on the counter while I waited for the pot. The screen lit up with a balance alert I'd set years ago, the kind that fires off when the balance drops below $5,000. I'd never once seen it trigger, not in 22 years of that account being open. The number I saw when I unlocked the phone was $4,812. I stood there long enough that the coffee finished brewing, and I didn't pour any. That account was supposed to have just under $230,000 in it, my pension payout from 31 years working maintenance management for the county. The proceeds from selling our house in Denton, the one my wife and I bought when my son was 3 years old, the one we painted ourselves, the one with the garden she started from seed every single March. We downsized after she got sick, moved into a smaller place in Garland to be closer to her sister. The sale money went straight into that account, and now it was showing me $4,812. I set the phone face down on the counter. I picked it back up. I checked again. The number didn't change. I need to back up, because none of this makes sense without understanding how the account got set up the way it did. And understanding that means I have to be honest about some choices I made when I was scared and not thinking straight. My wife, Carol, and I know I said I wouldn't dwell, but stay with me here. She was diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's in 2021. She was 63. The doctors were straightforward with us. It would progress. They didn't know how fast, and we needed to start thinking about financial and legal arrangements while she could still participate in making them. That was the word they used. Participate. Like it was a school project. We had 2 kids. My son, who I'll call Elliot, he's 34, lives in Phoenix, works in logistics. Good job, solid guy but scattered. He means well and then forgets to call back. The other is my daughter-in-law situation, which is a whole thing I'll get to, but the relevant person here is my daughter. My daughter is Nora. She's 38, lives 40 minutes from me in Frisco, and at the time Carol got sick, she was the one who stepped up immediately. She drove Carol to appointments. She organized the medications. She sat with me in the parking lot of the neurologist's office while I tried not to fall apart, and she just held my hand and didn't say anything, and that meant everything. So when my attorney suggested we add a trusted family member to the account, someone who could manage things if I became incapacitated or if Carol needed care decisions made quickly, I added Nora. She was the obvious choice. She was right there. She was already doing the work. What I didn't do was add my son, and I'll tell you why. It wasn't because I trusted him less as a person. It was because he was 1,200 miles away, because I knew he'd feel guilty about the distance and try to compensate by overmanaging things, and because frankly Nora had already proven she could handle it. I told Elliot what I'd done and he said he understood. Maybe he did. Maybe he didn't, not entirely. But that's what happened. Carol passed in October of 2023. The last 6 months were hard in a way I don't have the words for yet. Nora was there through all of it. She was there more than I was, in the ways that counted, because I was so inside my own grief that I couldn't see clearly. After the funeral, after everyone went home, and the casseroles stopped showing up and the phone stopped ringing, it was Nora who kept coming by. She'd show up on a Saturday morning with groceries I didn't ask for, and just start putting things away like it was normal. I let her. I was grateful. What I wasn't paying attention to was the account. I know how that sounds. $230,000, and I wasn't watching it. But here's what you have to understand. I was 61 years old. I just buried my wife of 36 years. I was still going to work because staying home was worse, and I trusted my daughter completely. She had access to the account because I gave it to her. I had set up automatic bill pay for utilities, insurance, the mortgage on the Garland place. I knew money was moving in and out. I wasn't tracking every transaction because I thought I didn't have to. I do the math now, and I feel sick about it. The alert came in June. By my best count, going back through statements I had to request from the bank, because I'd stopped checking them online, the systematic withdrawals had been going on for about 16 months. Not huge amounts, not at first. 800 here, 1200 there. Transfers I might have glanced at and thought were automatic payments I'd forgotten setting up. Then they got bigger. 4,000, 7,000. Twice in 1 week the previous November, 2 transfers of $9,000 each. Both on days I remember clearly because I was out of town helping Elliot move into a new apartment. I sat down at the kitchen table after I checked the account that morning, and I did not get up for a long time. The branch manager's name was a woman named Patricia. I'd met her once when I came in to set up the joint access for Nora years ago. I called the bank's main number, got through to someone, explained what I was seeing, and they transferred me to the branch. Patricia wasn't in yet. I was told to call back after 9. I looked at the clock. It was 7:43. I drove to the branch. I sat in the parking lot until the lights came on. Patricia remembered me. She shook my hand and said she was glad I'd come in, which struck me as a strange thing to say to someone who'd just walked in looking the way I must have looked. She sat me down in the glass office off to the side of the teller windows and pulled up the account on her screen and went quiet for a long moment. She asked me if I'd authorized the withdrawals. I told her I had not. She turned the screen so I could see it. 41 transactions over 16 months. I won't give you every number, but I will tell you that when she scrolled to the top and I saw the beginning balance and I saw the current balance, the room got a little strange around the edges and I had to put both hands flat on her desk. She asked me if I wanted water. I said yes. She got it herself. When she came back, she said something I've turned over in my mind many times since. She said, "Mr. Hargrove, I want you to understand that we're going to do everything we can here, but I also want to make sure you understand what you're looking at before you make any decisions, because what you do in the next few hours is going to matter." She didn't say anything else right away. She just waited. I said, "My daughter is the only other person on this account." She nodded. She said she knew. I drove home. I sat in the driveway for 20 minutes. I called Elliot. Now, here is where I have to tell you about Elliot's wife, because she is relevant in a way I didn't understand until later. Her name is Simone. Elliot met her 3 years ago. They got married last spring, and I want to be careful about how I say this. I do not dislike Simone. She's a smart woman. She works in real estate. She's organized. She asks good questions. But from the beginning, there was something in the dynamic between her and Nora that I couldn't quite name. A competition, maybe, for Elliot's attention, or something older and more complicated that had to do with Simone feeling like an outsider to a family that had its own way of doing things. I don't know. I'm not a therapist, but I noticed it. What I didn't expect was that when I told Elliot what I'd found in the account, his first question wasn't, "Are you okay?" His first question was, "Did Nora know you were going to call me?" I told him what I'd found. I told him the number. I told him about the 41 transactions. There was a silence on the phone. Then he said, "You should talk to Simone." I didn't know what that meant. I said, "She's your wife, Elliot. This is between me and your sister right now." He said, "Just talk to her. She knows some things." I didn't call Simone. Not then. I called my attorney instead, a man I'd worked with for 15 years named Clifton Webb. Good man. Careful, not the kind to get excited. I told him what I'd told Patricia. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, I needed to get to his office that afternoon and bring every bank statement I could get my hands on going back 2 years. I spent the morning requesting statements online and printing them. 62 pages. I sat at my kitchen table with a highlighter and went through every single line. I found things I'd never noticed because I'd never been looking. A $3,400 transfer to a PayPal account I didn't recognize. A recurring $850 monthly transfer to an account I couldn't identify. A $12,000 wire transfer in March of last year, labeled simply personal transfer, that had gone to a bank I'd never heard of. My hands were shaking by the time I got to the end. I drove to Clifton's office at 2 in the afternoon. He looked at the statements for a long time without saying anything. Then he looked up and said, "Have you talked to Nora?" I hadn't. I said that. He said, "Do you want to do that before or after we know more?" I said I didn't know. He said, "Okay, here's what I'd recommend. Before you have that conversation, I'd like you to have the bank freeze any further transfers on the account and separate your access from hers. That way nothing else moves while we figure out what happened." I said, "She's my daughter." He said, "I know she is." I didn't say anything for a minute. Then I said, "Let's do it." I called Patricia from Clifton's office, and she walked me through what needed to happen to restrict the account. She said she'd flagged the transaction history for their fraud department as well. She said it in a way that was professional and kind at the same time, which I appreciated. That night, Nora called me. She called at 7:13. I know because I was staring at the phone when it lit up. I let it ring through. She left a voicemail. She said she'd heard from Elliot that there was a problem with the account and she wanted to talk. Her voice sounded normal. Not nervous, not guilty. Just normal, the way it always sounded. I didn't call her back. The next morning, Elliot called again. This time he said Simone had been wanting to tell me something for a while but didn't know how. He said she'd seen some things, documents, numbers, that didn't add up, and that she'd been trying to figure out how to say something without starting a war with Nora. I said, Elliot, I need you to just tell me. He said, it wasn't Nora. I didn't understand at first. I said, Elliot, Nora is the only other person. He stopped me. He said, Simone found records. She works in real estate. She looks at financial documents all the time. She saw something a few months ago when she was helping you and Mom get the estate paperwork sorted. The PayPal account that was getting the transfers, Simone tracked it. It's registered to a business. The business is registered to a name I didn't recognize, but the address on the registration is a property that Nora manages for a client. I sat down. He said, the name on the account is Vincent Pardee. I knew that name. Vincent Pardee was Nora's business partner. They'd started a property management side business together 2 years earlier. Something small, she said, just a few rental properties, bringing in a little extra income. She'd mentioned it casually. I'd said that sounds good. I hadn't asked for details. What Simone had found, and she'd been meticulous about it, she'd printed everything, dated everything, was that the transfers from my account had been funding the business. Not as loans, not with any documentation, as cash infusions that moved through PayPal and then into the business's operating account, probably to cover shortfalls when the rental income didn't cover costs. Vincent Pardee had Nora's trust. He also had a record of 2 previous fraud complaints in Harris County, which Simone had found doing a public records search, because that's the kind of person she is. I don't know how to describe what I felt then. It wasn't what you'd expect. It wasn't rage. It was something quieter and colder, like a door closing on something I hadn't known was still open. Nora didn't take the money because she wanted a vacation, or because she was greedy in some simple, understandable way. She took it, or let it be taken, which I'm still not entirely sure how to apportion between her and Pardee, because she had gotten in over her head in a business she couldn't control and she was too proud or too scared, or too something to come to me and tell me the truth. She had access to the account because I gave it to her in a moment when I needed help, and she stepped up. She used that access, or allowed someone else to use it through her, over 16 months while I was grieving her mother.
That's the part that keeps me up at night.
My attorney filed the fraud complaint on a Tuesday. The bank's fraud department had already flagged several of the transactions as potentially unauthorized and opened their own investigation. Patricia called me personally to let me know. She said the FDIC protections in a case like this were real, that they would work to determine what could be recovered, and that I should not give up on seeing at least a significant portion of the money returned. She said it carefully and professionally, and I could tell she was being honest with me about what was realistic and what wasn't. Clifton's sent Nora a formal letter. He sent one to Vincent Pardee as well, copying Nora. I didn't call her. She called me. I picked up this time. She didn't make excuses immediately, which surprised me. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know it had gotten that bad. She said Pardee had convinced her that it was temporary, that the business would recover, that she would put the money back before I ever noticed. She said she knew that wasn't good enough. She said she was sorry again. I said, Nora, I put you on that account because I trusted you. Because your mother trusted you. You were the one who was there. She didn't say anything. I said, your mother died thinking you were looking out for me. I heard her start to cry. I didn't say anything else. I didn't have anything else. What followed was 6 months of legal and financial proceedings that I'll spare you the full details of, because frankly they were exhausting, and I'm still not entirely through them. The short version, the bank's investigation, combined with the fraud complaint, resulted in a recovery process. The FDIC's framework in cases of unauthorized access to joint accounts is real, and it applies. Patricia was right about that. Not every dollar came back, but enough. Pardee was charged. He's navigating that through his own attorney. Nora was not charged criminally, though Clifton made clear to her attorney that the civil exposure was real. She repaid what she could access, with documentation in a structured agreement. Elliot flew in. He didn't say "I told you so" about Simone, which I appreciated. He just showed up with groceries in a way that reminded me a little of how Nora used to, and we sat at my kitchen table and talked for a long time about things we probably should have talked about sooner. About how we handled the aftermath of Carol's death. About distances, geographic and otherwise. Simone, and I want to say this plainly, Simone didn't have to spend the time she spent digging through those records. She's not a forensic accountant. She's a daughter-in-law who noticed something and cared enough to be thorough about it before she said a word. She did it quietly, without starting a war with Nora, waiting until she was sure. I didn't appreciate her the way I should have. I do now. Here's what I know about my daughter. I know that she was not a bad person before any of this happened. I know she was in over her head and made choices that were, at the bottom of them, cowardly. I know that she is still my daughter, and I don't know yet what the relationship looks like from here. What I know is that it's different now in a way that doesn't go back. There's a version of trust that, once you see what's on the other side of it, you don't get to unsee. I changed the account. I changed my will. I changed the automatic bill pay. I also, on Clifton's advice, set up a new financial arrangement with a different structure. One where I have a professional fiduciary involved in any account that holds more than a certain amount, rather than a family member with unmonitored access. It costs money. It is worth every cent. Elliot calls more now. He doesn't always know what to say. He calls anyway. I'm learning to accept the call for what it is, which is him trying. The thing I come back to is this. Simone did something that required a particular kind of courage, the kind that doesn't get any applause. She found something that was going to blow up her husband's family, and she sat with it long enough to be sure, documented it carefully, and then told the truth about it when it mattered. She is not the person I would have named if you'd asked me a year ago, who in my life I could count on. I would have named Nora. I was wrong in the most expensive and most painful way a person can be wrong. The morning I found the balance in my account, the coffee went cold, and I never poured a cup. I make it a point now to actually sit down when the pot finishes. Carol used to say I was always moving, always getting ahead of whatever came next, and maybe if I'd slowed down sooner, paid closer attention, I'd have seen this coming. Maybe not. I've stopped being sure about what I would have done. What I'm sure about is what I do now. I check the account every morning. I know every number in it. I trust carefully and verify anyway. Not because I think everyone is going to hurt me, but because the people who hurt you most are almost always the ones you didn't think to watch. The coffee is never cold anymore. That's something.